Welcome to Hey Soul Sista, the podcast for women ready to embrace greater joy, freedom, and a soulful life. And if you enjoyed this episode, please remember to subscribe, follow, like, and share. Hey Soul Sisters. In last week's episode, we heard the incredibly moving story of Sophie Piggott, including how being bullied as a young girl and teenager became the catalyst for her struggle with anorexia, and how she later found healing and peace after years of pain and trauma. So that conversation really opened up such an important topic, and I had many women reach out to share their own stories of being bullied when they were younger or are trying to support their own daughters who are being bullied now. So today, I've invited back one of my favourite guests, Charlotta Thaarup, who's a mindfulness and leadership expert, counsellor and therapist, and someone who works deeply in the space of emotional awareness and human behaviour. So we're diving into why girls bully each other, why some teenage girls become mean, competitive or exclusive, and what's really going on underneath that behaviour. We'll also explore how parents can support their daughters, whether they're being bullied or are doing the bullying, and how we can all help raise kinder, more emotionally aware young women. Hey, Charlotta, thank you so much for coming back on Hey Soul Sister today.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
I
love it.
I always love having you on Hey Soul Sister. I feel like we have really great, juicy conversations. Yeah.
Yes. It's one of the things we do well.
Life and behaviour and
right.
how we can do this life better.
Yes. And diving right into sort of the granular elements of it, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, which is where the juice is.
I agree. And I say this all the time, but I go, we want to live our most joyful, our best lives. And you know what? Sometimes there's a bit of work to be done there.
Always.
Inner work.
Always. And it never stops.
That's
the other thing. I'd really like to shout to everybody, because sometimes I get an email from somebody going, wow, I'm kind of done. I go, darling, it's just a moment on a plateau.
Yeah.
Till the next thing happens and you go, whoa. Right.
Absolutely. I say that all the time to myself, and when I'm talking to people like the women we see at Got You Back Sister, I say to them, you know what, good on you for doing the work. I have to do the inner work, and I know it's a lifelong journey.
Yes.
And I figure that out because every time I think I've got it sorted out, everything's just like trucking along dandy. The universe comes along and goes, nah, sister.
But I think there's a deeper wisdom in that one, isn't it? Because if our expectation is to say, that when something annoying happens or we get triggered again, that's a problem and we want to get rid of it. That's part of the problem mindset rather than going, this is part of life.
Absolutely.
Right? That difficulties happen and through that we grow. And that is the purpose, if you like. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so I love that you're coming in, recording this episode today, because it was actually this week that I released the episode with Sophie Piggott, who's a wonderful woman, a shining light. She's 28 years old and she's a nutritional biochemist and doing wonderful work with helping people with their health to live their best healthy lives. But she was really honest talking about her struggle with anorexia, being in an abusive relationship when she was in her early 20s. She was very vulnerable and very sharing of her story. But really it was her talking about her experience being with bullying that began around 12 years old, and that being the catalyst for an eating disorder, her eating disorder, that really struck a chord with listeners. I had a number of people reach out to me with comments like how heartbreaking it was to hear Sophie's story, but also saying that happened to me. I was bullied when I was a girl, how awful and traumatic that was for them. But then also mum saying, my daughter is being bullied and I'm trying to help and support her. And it feels like I'm fighting a losing battle. And so I reached out to you, Charlotta, because you're an expert in human behaviour. You do a lot of one-on-one therapy with people, counselling, which you've been doing for years. And I thought, this is obviously a topic that really strikes a chord with people.
Many. Yes, exactly.
Touches many people, which is really, really sad.
It's enormously sad. I mean, we just talked about it before to say that, 50% of all children in Australia will say that they've been bullied last year. Like, that's horrific. When we know it affects the brain for life, unless we get good intervention, it changes the epigenetics. So it changes us. It makes us much more vulnerable. It changes our relationship to ourselves. So it often leads to lower self-esteem, to the imposter syndrome, to anxiety. And that means that we wander through life with a more vulnerable disposition. And it's so unnecessary, right? I mean, I sometimes when I'm thinking of this kind of thing, I think, imagine all the gold, if you like, that's wasted in these humans because they walk around anxious and self-conscious, not trusting relationships, not trusting other humans. Right? It's tragic.
Did you ever experience bullying as a child or a teen?
Not sort of ongoing, which of course is the most damaging. But my mother had an experience that I know has had an enormous impact on her. So they were very, very, very poor. And that meant that her mother would darn their underwear. She darned everything. And my mother tells a story of how they had gymnastics and then they were in the shower and somebody grabbed her underpants and held them up in front of everybody else and they laughed. And I know that for my mum, it meant I am not going to be poor for the rest of my life. And this enormous need to kind of show herself as a success, if you like. That's propelled from that and a disconnect from vulnerability. And then for me, it's a little story, but it's just, I think it's indicative of how the power of it. And that was my mother had been to France. She'd bought me, I was 5. She'd bought me this little tailor jacket, white with blue and white stripes and gold buttons. I went to a musical kindergarten. So I'm there in this jacket and I'm so proud of this jacket. I think it was fabulous. And I remember I was eating an orange and nobody wanted to sit with me. So I was excluded as a 5-year-old. And of course, who knows, it could have been coincidental, probably not, but it could have been. Nonetheless, I concluded it's not safe to really dress up, to really shine. And that's just a very, imagine that just one little incident. Imagine if you had that stacked day after day after day. It has an enormous impact on all our beliefs about ourselves and the world.
Well, and when you were saying that, I was remembering when Emma Thompson was on Hey Soul Sista. It was a couple of years ago now, and she came on to share her story about she had a complete psychotic breakdown.
Yes.
When she was, I think she was between 19, I think she was around 19, 20. And when we were talking about it, what caused the psychotic breakdown, she said that she had suffered terrible bullying at school and it was a daily thing.
Right.
So it's interesting. I know that people or therapists will talk about big T traumas, like one big traumatic event, and little T traumas, which might be continuing little traumas that happen, frequently. And for her, it was that.
Yes.
And she was talking about how the kids every day at school would do things like steal her lunchbox and steal her bag or, just do little nasty things. Humiliate her every day. So she ended up with like a chronic anxiety and depression, which by the time I'm sure it was around 19. You can go back and listen to the episode if you like. I might reshare that. But she had a full psychotic breakdown, was institutionalized. She was talking about when I remember I said to her, what does that look like? What was that experience like for you having a psychotic breakdown? And she said everybody in the world looked like zombies, that they were walking dead, and that she was in absolute terror and fear, which seems kind of hard for us to understand and comprehend, but she was living that. And so they were medicating her. She was institutionalized for a while until they got her to a point that they were able to heal her.
Yeah.
But you go, that's an extreme example of the impact.
Yeah. But it creates an ongoing, often lifelong vulnerability unless you get treatment, right?
Yes.
So that's the problem. So it's like a weakness in your system. So you're vulnerable to, if something else happens, you're just not as resilient, as robust as others would be. And, if we go back to who are most likely to be bullied, sadly, it is more those who are not as privileged That's just how it goes. Much more common amongst Indigenous people and low socioeconomic. They are the ones that are picked on. So it kind of also perpetuates this, social injustice, if you like, right?
You've been doing therapy with people for years, and I imagine people come to you for all different reasons.
Yes.
When you are, over the years, when you have been doing counselling or therapy with people, how often does bullying show up as an issue or a cause potentially of mental health issues?
It never shows up as the first thing people think of. That usually they come in because they're anxious, because they're depressed, or something's happened. And then when we start to dig and I ask, were you bullied? So often that's the case. So often, and often many years. And we know, of course, the longer it's happened, the greater impact, if you like, on the brain, on the central nervous system. But often it's not linked. It's something like, oh, that happened a long time ago. Yes, but your whole system is now geared towards be alert, be careful. People are not safe. And also internally, did they like me? Do they not like me? Should I not have said that? And all of that kind of thing, which, even if you haven't had bullying, it's there. But if you have bullying, imagine it's a relentless, if you like, track that just runs all the time.
Now, I know there's a stats around this, and you're probably aware of that, but it would appear as though bullying is a really big issue among girls, prepubescent girls and teen girls. Is that right?
The research shows actually that more boys bully.
Oh, really?
And that girls are more bullied.
Really?
Yes. Which also surprised me, but I wonder if it's just because the other is more subtle and not declared.
Yes.
And it does peak between 12 and 15 for girls. So it is that adolescent time and it is more common amongst the alpha girls and the more popular girls. So if you have a group where there's no alphas popping up, you're probably more robust. And also if you have more groups than just one friendship group, you're much more resilient to it happening. So that's a good tip actually for parents, making sure that their children don't just have one group of friends, but have the ones that they do around music, around dancing, around, soccer or whatever it is, because it just means that not all their eggs in one basket. So when something happens, it's not quite as painful.
That's a really great tip. And it's funny, I was talking to Joey at work one day, and I'm sure she wouldn't mind me sharing this because it's a lovely, little anecdote. And she was actually talking to me about that. She said, you know what? She said, I never really had too much of an issue with bullying at school, but she said it was because I had friendship circles outside of school.
Yes.
She was very involved with sport and various sporting teams. And so she said, oh, do you know what? If something was going on at school, she was like, oh, that's okay. I'm going to play netball with these girls. And it was never a big issue because the girls she played netball with, I don't think were necessarily school. And she was playing high level netball, so probably various representative teams and things. And I'm like, yeah, that's a really good tip for mums, for parents.
Yes. Yeah. And just coming back to, I think it often peaks there, but of course some women, and this is, sad to say, but never really, outlive it. I mean, I remember being a parent dropping children off at a certain school. Yeah, I won't say which one, but honestly, the dynamics between the mothers was just exactly the same as in the teenage years. Who was invited to who sat next to who did the person talk to? And there will be tears and drama relentlessly, which is so sad, right? But my theory is that is it almost an instinctive thing, when the girls actually start to want the gaze of the boys. And so women traditionally have been the subgroup. So the competition there is for the best catch. And so then they, through not direct means, but indirect means, seek to discredit each other, to exclude each other, to position themselves as the key catch group, if you like, and the main one, ideally, who will get the best catch. I would hate to think it is that, but I have a suspicion that it might. I mean, I talked to another friend who was bullied in the workplace, and it was about the two women who bullied her both wanted the boss for different reasons.
Well, I experienced that, yes.
Yeah.
I experienced that when I was in my early 20s and I got my first part-time job while I was at uni working in an office. And it was interesting. I shared an office with the boss, who was a bit older than me, so I was never interested in him, and I had a boyfriend. And
5 years older.
Yeah, I was like, oh, God. I was 21, he was 28. I'm like, well, that's way too old. And I had a boyfriend, so I was not interested in any way, shape or form. But one of the office women, I found out later on, and she had been quite mean to me.
And how was she mean to you? What was the method?
How
did you know?
She would get snappy with me.
So just a brief sort of like.
Yeah. She would get snappy with me for no reason, for things that, you know, if I went and asked her a question about something, she was one of the accounts clerks, and I might go and ask her a question about something, and she would be very snappy with me. And I used to be a bit like, oh, that's weird, but okay.
Yes.
Something's going on with her. But because I was 21 and I had a life, I had uni and boyfriend and friends, you know, I didn't really worry me too much, but I noticed it.
Yes.
And then she, you know, had a few drinks at the Christmas party, and I did something for her which she thought was very nice. I was very kind to her around something, and she actually then, after a few drinks, shared with me that she actually had been incredibly jealous of me, and it was around the boss.
Yeah.
Which is funny because then I reflect on that. She used to come in all the time and try and put her arms around the boss, which I was like, that's weird. Okay, whatever. But you're right. It came around wanting the attention of this man. Yeah, weird. Yeah. I thought it was weird at the time, but yeah, okay. But you're right. It does. Yeah, I do get that. Absolutely.
And of course, traditionally, women's status hasn't been their own profession. It's been the status of the man, right? So it's a positioning for the best catch, not just for love or infatuation, but also social positioning.
Like in the workplace.
Yep.
Yeah. So coming back to talking about the stat around girls 12 to 15. And being a higher incidence of bullying there, what's going on psychologically or behaviourally there? What's going on for those girls, the mean girls that are bullying?
Yeah, I don't know that it's conscious. I don't think it is. I mean, the research shows very clearly that the children, and this is not going to be very popular, but the children who are bullies often have parents who were actually also bullies. It doesn't mean it's always, but there's much more likelihood. And those that are bullied are more likely to have parents who are bullied, which is interesting.
It is interesting, and you're right. It may not be popular.
No, that's right.
People don't want to think of themselves as either the bully or the victim.
No.
They want to see themselves as neutral, but actually the stats would say that's not the case.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I think that, you know, it's fair to say that if they're in the family is a very high focus on appearance, on status, and perhaps being a little bit superficial and not really, for instance, when children before this age come home and they complain about somebody, is the question asked, what do you think might happen for this child? What are they going through? Tell me, do you know what's happening at home for them? Or how might that feel? And how could you act with kindness? If we behave like that, definitely they are less likely to be bullies. Bringing forth empathy, deeper understanding of how others feel is one of the buffers.
Certainly I would think that social media has a big part to play in bullying these days.
Yes. And it makes the cuts deeper, doesn't it? Because before we didn't know when we were excluded. Now you'll know, right? And the pressure to look good is also so much more powerful because there's freaking photographs everywhere and mirrors everywhere, right? So I think it's definitely intensified.
The comparisonitis, the feeling of being included or excluded.
Yes.
And jealousy.
Yes. And I think coming back to the question why girls function like that is that I think it's fair to say that the currency for women, girls in general, is about being connected. And so that means that how do we then hurt others? We disconnect them, right? And we know that it's intuitive. And we can do that through bad mouthing them. We can do that through gossip. We can do that through not looking at them. We can do that through sort of making sure there's no seat at the table. We can do do it to them like Sophie experienced, which is just so cruel and horrible. And of course, she remembers that so in every cell of her body. But I doubt that the bully will even remember, right? Because it didn't hurt her. And we know that what hurts really sticks in our minds because the system goes, do not repeat that. But the bully, there was no wound in that. So it's likely she just went, I don't know what she's talking about, or that wasn't me, or whatever.
Somebody who reached out to me after Sophie's episode and shared with me that her daughter is going through, and she's the same age, her daughter's 12, she's in year 6.
Right.
And she said the same thing is happening. These girls in her class are organised that they were all going to get together, and then the daughter went, and it was the similar thing. Oh, we were joking. We would never invite you.
Oh.
And so my friend, she's heartbroken.
Oh,
the
it's so
daughter's
painful.
heartbroken.
It's so
She's
painful.
heartbroken. You hear that story and we go, that is so cruel.
Yes.
So that's what I go, how can those girls be so cruel?
I think they're disconnected from empathy. I think they are. I think that would be the first thing to because they don't think of how it feels for the other. And I think it is likely that perhaps they haven't had those conversations early on that really ignite empathy.
And potentially maybe not role modelled.
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
At home.
Yeah. And also the school is, also responsible. I mean, everyone's put a part of this, right? Are we modeling kindness, and are we modeling consideration for how others feel? Like I remember years ago, my son came home and he said, oh, there's this boy in class and he just doesn't, he dresses in a way where he always looks dorky and he'd like to be cool. And I said, so what do you think, what could you do to help him? Oh, I think I'm going to have a talk to him about how he can, just not have his shirt tucked in and his pants quite so high, right? And so he did, right? And he said, oh, he's much better now. And I think that's a kind of a very that's a boy's perspective, but nonetheless, how do you best help this person to be included should be the question, right?
Yeah. And that's role modelling the kindness. Yeah.
Yeah.
For your son.
Yes.
Wouldn't it be great if more kids could consider that, the empathy? And again, they're like, I guess I then go on the other side, well, they're kids, they're learning, they're growing.
Yeah, but they grow in the soup of, of us.
Yeah.
Don't they? I think that's the important thing to remember. They could be formed in any direction. And then I think the other challenge as a parent is if your child then says that they've been bullied, what we notice as parents, we become so protective, don't we? I mean, I can still sort of think of situations where I thought, ooh, I wanted to smash this kid, which is horrific.
Yeah.
But it's so intense, isn't it?
Yeah.
So how do we manage that and not perpetuate it?
That's a really important one. Absolutely. Because I guess, again, this is anecdotally, but hearing conversations between mothers, mums that I know, friends that I know, and how emotionally charged
Yes,
they get around that. And so maybe not always
the wisest,
making the wisest decisions or communicating in the wisest of ways.
No.
Kind of almost buying into the
absolutely
gossip.
Yes.
And they're trying to be protective of their daughters, but
they're reacting.
Yeah. Which is why I remember when I was when Maxie was in primary school, every now and then we'd get a note home from the school going, it's not okay, parents, for you to go and approach another child and have a go at another child.
Right.
Which you go, yeah, fair enough, right?
Yeah.
They were like, talk to us about it. Don't go and approach that child in the playground and
whack them. No. Because it's that protective element. Yeah. So how do we deal with it, right?
Absolutely.
And with everything, it's always about that early intervention, right? So we know that when a child is bullied, the first signs is they become a bit more quiet. They perhaps don't want to go to school. They just want to be left alone. They sulk. They're more reactive. Their schoolwork drops off. All of those little, we should straight away go to, is this a situation, right? And then really be able to listen without wanting to fix straight away, but allow the child to say, what is happening? And perhaps even leaving the labels off. And that's why they hold that lightly, because I don't think the labels are always the best. Like it's more saying, because it's always about a dynamic. So tell me what happened, James, right? Tell me what happened yesterday, and then how did you feel, and what did you say, and what did she do then, and what did he do then? So you're really kind of mapping it. And then ideally saying, is there something you think you could do differently? Do you think that, and whether you're the bully or the victim, if you like, what could you do differently? What would feel better, if you like, right, in the long run? And what do you think they're going through? Do you know what's happening for this child? Like really bringing it into sort of a rich conversation with the child, right? And then you can, of course, if they go, I think I should have it. Like I was talking to somebody yesterday, and her 9-year-old had a sort of I'm going to go and talk to him. Which is just fabulous. And then you might say, well, would you like us to just role model that? Would you like us to just practice what you might say? Because so they learn, which is a beautiful little technique, I think, right? And so ideally, in an ideal world, it's then resolved early on, and they get the kind of the skills, if you like, to deal with it. Because the research is super clear. If the child resolves it, there's no trauma, right? There's no negative effect on your brain, if you like, because it re-empowers them. The thing is, if it goes undetected and it goes on and on and on.
I remember our youngest, I'm sorry, Maxie, I'm going to share this, but I think it was a bit cute. He used to come home and he used to talk about one particular kid that was bothering him.
Mm.
And I knew that this kid did not have a good home life.
Yeah.
And so I used to say to Maxie, you know what? This kid doesn't have a great home life, Maxa. Just try and be kind to him. Now, one day I was dropping him off at school and he was like, Mum, this kid, I'll call him Brian. His name's not Brian. I'll say Brian. Mum, Brian, he did this and he said this and I said this. And I went, right, okay, I know I've said to you to be kind and that should be your first protocol. Go to, be kind. But you also need to stick up for yourself, buddy.
Yep.
Don't take crap from people.
Yep.
So if Brian is giving you a really hard time, be kind. But if he keeps going on, it's okay for you to stick up for yourself.
Yes.
So, of course, that day I got a phone call from the school saying, by the way, your son Max has thrown a ball at this kid's head. So when I went to pick Max up at the end of the day, I'm like, Maxa, what went on, buddy? And Max said, well, Mum, Brian just wouldn't stop. He wouldn't stop. So he said I was sticking up for myself.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and of course, Brian then retaliated and there was a bit of a whole wrestle situation going on. But yeah, that was interesting.
Navigate
that.
Yes.
Be kind, but then also be resilient and stick up for yourself.
Absolutely.
Because I don't want you to be a victim.
No.
And
actually, I think, that sounds like a really good approach. But also we can take that further to go, we know one of the most powerful preventative interventions, if you like, of bullying is the bystanders actually act, right? So that thing of extending that and going, okay, so when, is there a friend who could have done it? Or also, are you seeing bullying? We could talk to our children. Do you see is there somebody in your class who you think is actually suffering a bit, who's not happy? And are they being picked on? And when they're being picked on, could you actually go and sit next to them? Could you say, hey, I really like that food if everyone else is pretending. Could you bring more for that for me, tomorrow? So that they create an alliance, because that's one of the most powerful ways for the bully to show that they're not having the power that they wanted. So I think that's another thing to educate our children to be the honorably good bystander and support of those that might be suffering.
Because isn't that wonderful when you're in that situation? Not necessarily being bullied, but you're feeling, oh gosh, I'm excluded or whatever, and for somebody to come up and have a chat with you and include you.
Yes.
Isn't that the
best?
best?
It's a remedy.
Well,
right?
And we all want to belong.
Yes, that's right.
We all want to belong.
Yep.
Some people would say that's a law of the jungle. It's a tribal thing. And women, we are very relational. We like to be connected to other people. And doesn't it feel nice to actually go,
yes.
Hey.
Yes.
So that's something we can teach our children.
Yes. And ourselves be on the watch out for. As somebody, even with Christmas coming up, are there people in your world who might be there alone, right? And so then can you include them? I think that's a really nice ongoing practice, isn't it?
So Charlotta, if you're a parent and you discover that maybe it's your child is the bully, how can you approach that without shame or anger? What can you do to support that child that may be the instigator of the bullying or the ringleader of the bullying?
Yeah. There are quite a few things. I think the first thing is to accept it within yourself, because that's hard, right? We just... everything's going to be, but there's a reason, or somebody else did it before, or we're going to do all that stuff. To that to go accept. So
don't get defensive.
Yes. To be open to, is it possible? And to know, A, we change all the time, and B, behavior is not something we should conclude deeper traits about. Because somebody has displayed bullying behavior does not mean that that's their personality. They'll always be like that. It's just, okay, in this dynamic, something's happened. And what is happening behind that for them to do that? So that ongoing curiosity with the child. So tell me, what's happening? Again, I would just inquire to really map it out. And then the deeper you get into the conversation, you go, so how do you think that would be for the other? What do you think that, when they go home to their mum, what would they say? How do you think they feel? I would keep inquiring in to, again, bring forth that empathy and consideration for the other. Right? And again, I mean, ideally, and I know this is sort of a dream world perhaps, but ideally see it as this is an acute learning opportunity, right? Possibly for the whole family, right? To sort of go, wow, have we actually dropped the ball a little bit on the empathy? And are we a little bit too ambitious, too pushy, too rushed, and not present with deeper conversations?
So what we don't want is for children to be suffering that trauma and especially those little traumas to become the big trauma
ongoing
that affects them for the rest of their lives.
And I think that's the important thing, is to say, that if you're facing this with your children, think about, we are always contributing not just to our own life, to our own family, but to the cultural soup that is Australia, the country we live in, right? And how do we, through our small actions, like to act in ways that make it a better future for everybody?
So, Charlotta, what do you think are the most common mistakes that parents make in responding to bullying situations?
I think perhaps one of them is that it's undetected, that we sort of just think, oh, the child is, we're in a hurry and now they don't want to go to school. Oh, bother. Can you just freaking hurry up? And we just push. And the child then feels even more disconnected, right? Because they feel disconnected and ostracized at school. And now they also don't have a safe place at home. So I think, this is probably one of the biggest, right? And then the problem gets worse and worse. And we just think we have this problem child versus actually really looking at the bigger picture. So perhaps being slow to act and ignoring, it's probably I think one of the biggest ones. And then also believing everything the child says as the gospel and reacting from that versus really going in and being kindly curious. And then potentially also collaborating with other parents to say, how are we going to work on this versus just being protective and defensive around our own children, right? And then, of course, getting the school involved as well. My goddaughter in Denmark was bullied when she was about 15. She's a beautiful girl and very bright. And she came to a school where that was not tolerated.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it was horrible. And I mean, and it still affected her today. But I said to my friend then, let's just bring her to Australia. So she was then in Australia with us for 3 months, and it reset her so that when she went back to a different school. And I think, she would still say it has affected her, but not at all how badly it could have been. So I think also, if it keeps going, you've tried everything else, then actually shifting schools and get them out of that environment is really important, knowing the impact of their future life that it has to be in this toxic soup of bullying.
It sucks.
Yeah.
It really does.
Yeah.
I will say, I remember when I was a girl and in primary school in Canberra, actually. So in I reckon about year 3 or 4. And I remember I must have been talking to my mum about being bullied or being ostracized, and probably not necessarily using those words, but coming home and saying to mum, the girls are doing this or the girls are doing that. Yeah. I'm feeling left out, or they said this or did this. I know it's probably quite a gentle, sensitive, younger girl. It's certainly not an alpha female or anything like that whatsoever. It was interesting in, I guess the group of friends, there was a girl who I actually don't recall her necessarily being a bully, but she was certainly a girl that the other girls in the group fawned over. And I was reflecting why. She had a cool older sister. She always had cool clothes. Her sister had cool clothes. I don't recall her necessarily being mean or nasty, but it was the girls around her that would fawn over her and wanted her attention. And so it was almost like these other girls would be nasty to each other because they were they were competing for her attention.
Yes.
Anyway, I remember one day we were up on a hill in the playground and we were playing Smurfs under a tree, because Smurfs was such a big thing, our Smurf collections. And and I remember Mum had said to me, her advice to me was, if the girls are being nasty to you, stand up, pull your shoulders back, hold your head high and just walk away. And And I remember at the time thinking, yeah, it's crap advice, Mum, but okay.
Is that all you've got?
Is that all you've got? Seriously. But I was like, say 9. But I remember this one day, well, a couple of the girls are being nasty. We were playing Smurfs. And I remember Mum's voice popped in my head and I stood up, did that, put my head up, shoulders back, and I turned and walked away from them. And I went to another section of the school. This is at that lunchtime, and I sat there on my own and felt devastated. Devastated. I felt so alone, so ostracized. It was an awful feeling. But 10 minutes later, a couple of those girls came back and they were very lovely and they were very nice. And I remember thinking, hey, Mum was right about that.
That worked.
That worked because it was actually showing them, it was like the whole being resilient, right? I'm not a victim. I'm not going to cry in front of you. I'm not going to sook. I'm not going to cop it. I'm going to walk up and stand up and walk away. And I remember like, wow, this worked. Mum was right. Wow, maybe it wasn't crap advice after all.
Yes.
But that always, you know what, that always stood with me. And it's probably been, your mum might say, just walk away. And I go, yeah, actually, it's probably in terms of resilience to show I'm not a victim here.
Exactly.
I'm walking away from this.
Yes. And actually, it's interesting because the research shows that if the bully doesn't get what they want, which is somebody crying, somebody being unhappy, then eventually there's no point. It doesn't work. So that actually walking away or getting others to support the person and the person then feeling okay is another way, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, absolutely. But it's very hard to ask of a child when, their heart's hurting and the tears are coming. I mean, it's.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I share that story going, I'm no expert. That's just one example where I was like, felt a little bit validated and thought, yeah, okay, that worked.
Yes,
But you know what? Look, the whole issue of bullying, we hear about it all the time. We hear about it in the media, on social media, socially, people talking about it because it is such a big issue in our community. And then, hearing Sophie's story and other people's stories about the longer term impact.
Yeah. Yeah.
We need to do something, and it does, as parents, it does actually start with us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, the more neuroscience informs us of the ongoing impact that it changes our brains, it changes the epigenetics, then we know this is like smoking, this is like children drinking. It's an ongoing health hazard for the child, for the family, and for our society.
Absolutely. And something that we definitely need to do something about.
Yeah. And I think, perhaps one of the best things as parents we can do is to really make sure that we very early on have that connection with our child, and which means that we have to be more patient, we have to be more present, and that we ongoingly bring forth the empathy for others in the discussions that we have with our child.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Miss Charlotta.
Pleasure. What a good topic, important topic.
Oh, it really is, because it is such a big problem in the community.
Yeah. And like I said, I see people coming in at 35, 40, 45, 50, where they all their lives have suffered with depression and anxiety and never really tracing it back to that.
Yeah. So, my friend, how can people find you?
They can find me through the Mindfulness Clinic. So I'm on Instagram, and I also have a website. They can also just call me to make an appointment to book me for individual sessions or group sessions or retreats.
Therapy, or even just advice.
Yes, a good conversation.
Do you know what? You know that I come and have sessions with you, and really sometimes I just need to talk something out. I'm thinking this way, this happened. How could I have done that better?
Yes.
All of that.
Yeah.
An unbiased person to actually.
That might be a bit challenging at times.
You are challenging, but I love that. I love that you challenge me.
Well, I think that's part of it. Yeah.
Absolutely, because you don't want somebody just to say to you, yes, everything you're doing is great and perfect, when I know it's not.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And perhaps just finishing off with saying also that if a listener knows that they were bullied as a child, then I'd very much recommend that they do a body-based approach. They do EMDR or biofeedback, or they come to somebody who knows how to deal with body trauma.
So like somatic therapy.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
And I do the same thing as well, because that's where it's stuck. you cannot talk yourself out of this.
Somatic therapy has really helped me.
Yes.
Really
It's
helped
very
me.
powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Thank you for being curious about this.